Welcome to Messy Parenting, a Catholic conversation on marriage and family. I'm Mike Hernon.
I'm Alicia Hernon.
And our hope with this podcast in general is to spark some conversations for you and your spouse so that you might be more intentional parents and do a more effective job in your marriage and family life.
And I think that part of doing that is having that conversation with your spouse about how you're going to handle certain issues and to try to be prepared and not blindsided by things that comes up, because parenting is messy and difficult, and there is really no tried and true way or book or anything that's going to...
There wasn't an owner's manual when we got these kids.
That's what I'm talking about, exactly.
Yeah.
Kids keep you on the edge of your seat.
Yeah, and kids are full of surprises, and life is messy, and we're going to deal with stuff. Today we're going to talk about age appropriateness, and because what's right to share.
The world that we live in is messy.
That's right.
Unfortunately, and how do we...
That's putting it mildly. Yeah. That's putting it in the censored version.
And at some point, your kids are going to realize, yeah, I don't live in, a perfect land and a perfect world, but when is the right time for them to realize that?
That's right. That's right. So before we go too deep in the subject, let's start in prayer. So in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Oh, Lord Jesus, we come before you with great needs. We as parents, Lord, know that we need your wisdom, your grace, your mercy in our lives to help us navigate in this crazy, chaotic world. Give us the strength, the wisdom, and the courage to be bold, courageous Catholics who are in love with you and your church and who want nothing but your best for our children. So bless us all, Lord, in this holy and amazing mission of parenting. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
So, Holy Spirit, amen.
When you started saying, bless us, O Lord, I thought you were going to say, and these thy gifts.
Sometimes do you do that? I mean, we do that. I remember one time I had my kids leading, and they just blessed themselves, and then they started with, bless us, O Lord. And I'm like, wait a second. It's the Catholic outtakes or something.
Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is we've gotten some questions from parents, and a lot of times our topics, by the way, come from wonderful comments and questions people send us, which we really appreciate so much. Please keep them coming.
So whether it's on Facebook or email, to our website, messyparenting.org, wherever you might send it in to us, we'll try to get to it personally as much as we can, as well as it's a great starters for podcast topics.
So people have asked us about when to talk to their kids about certain issues. So, and there's,
it runs the gamut.
It really does run the gamut. Everything from, how are babies made, to abortion, to divorce. And so we're going to try to touch on some broad principles first, and then go into some specific issues.
Right, because the reality is that, as much as we might try, the world that we live in is full of a lot of crap.
Yeah.
And whether they're seeing it in the media, whether they're hearing it at schools, whether they're hearing it from their friends, or they're experiencing it, Mm-hmm. Alicia, you talked about how there was that recent
political advertisement by Deport Racism. I don't know if any of you have seen it. I know it was on Fox News. That's how I knew about it. But it's this, for those of you that aren't familiar, they're YouTube videos of little kids, like kids under 10, using foul language, basically cursing out Donald Trump. And no matter what you think about Donald Trump or politics, this is really...
totally inappropriate.
It's totally inappropriate. Obviously,
it's disgusting. It's awful.
It is. And it's really robbing these kids of their innocence,
Right.
And
they thought it was funny to have kids saying expletives.
Right. And now, I'm not saying that, every once in a while, of course, even our kids, they repeat words that they hear or whatever. But these are kids using these words like they're in a studio using them, like they were given a script and had to use them. This isn't by accident. And so that's just one example of how this world does not respect our children's innocence.
Right.
It does not respect their innocence.
Right.
And so we need to keep them safe physically, obviously. But I think the more immediate danger many times is keeping them, I guess, psychologically and emotionally safe.
Right, because again, I don't think we need to go through this too deeply, but it's in the language that is common in our culture, the dress that's common in our culture.
Yeah, like dressing little kids like they are...
provocative hookers or
exactly,
something. Exactly. It's just all these different things that just... that our world is going after and trying to rob them of their innocence. And I think every age it gets worse. Because there were, and maybe there's a cycle somewhat to these things, but it seems to be so much worse than when we were kids. The sexualization of our kids and all those different things. I mean, that little toddlers would have things that accentuate. I mean, although they don't have any.
They're little round balls.
Yeah.
But children, basically, what I want you to take away from this is that children are not little adults. Okay, so let's move from how they oh wait.
Sorry.
I was trying to pointing to me.
Well, no, you just said I'm a teacher.
Right. Oh, the whole children are not little adults, and many times in our culture, they the culture, and you see this like on movies and things like that, when it's really cute when the kids know the right thing to do, and the adults are the stupid ones.
That's right. That's
and
typical
the kids,
in TV shows, right?
Yeah, the adults are stupid, and the kids know what's the right thing to do.
Right. In the 60s, that song, right?
Exactly. Teach your parents well, that whole song. And that's kind of where that started, is that the kids know what's best.
Because everyone under the age of 30 knows nothing, or whatever that, the other sayings. I mean, there are things from like kind of revolutionary times that really are now, quote unquote, mainstream.
You mean like the sexual revolution?
Right, from the sexual revolution, but now all those sexual revolution people are baby boomers who are in charge of all the levers and switches in our media, in our government, in our academia.
And what I find is like really dangerous is when our kids watch those shows, and then when they turn around and talk to me, they are like, oh, well, I should know best. You know what I mean? They're not consciously thinking that, but they are subconsciously affected by those things. And I cannot tell you how many times I have said to my preteens and my teenagers, I am 44. You are 13. Who do you think knows more about this situation?
Right.
Now, of course, there's certainly times when they open my eyes to things I have not realized. Absolutely. But there are plenty of situations, especially even having to do with jobs, work, outside relations, things like that. They don't know what they're talking about, and they think that they do. Right. So, though that lie is very, very dangerous.
Right. And what Lou Holtz's line was at graduation at Franciscan last year was, just to be clear here, talking to all the college graduates, I've been 22. You haven't been 75.
Right, exactly. That's a great way of putting it. I've been 13. You haven't been 44 or 40 or 30 or whatever it is. Whatever old you are.
So just again, kind of to restate what I think we all know intuitively, but our job as Catholic parents, and I'd say this is probably true for all parents, but particularly for us as Catholics, is to protect our children's innocence, to protect their innocence from a world that wants to rip it apart, and to build in them a real sense of Christian maturity. And so the question really comes in, when is it appropriate to start sharing information, and how much, and not only when, how much, how to deal with it, because there's going to be times where, and we don't want to raise our kids in a bubble, okay?
Right.
But, what is the right time that they slowly begin to move out of, quote unquote, the bubble of innocence into the new area of Christian, what I'd characterize as Christian maturity, dealing with the world impeding in my innocent life that I'm trying to raise my family, my children in.
All right, so the first age group I want to just talk about and give some broad, insights, I guess, from our own parenting, really, because of course it's a little, I just want, of course, we kind of say this at the beginning, but we're not psychologists or counselors. We have no training. All I'm doing is I'm just sharing with you my perspective as an educator and my perspective as a mom.
Right.
And you can, back this up. You guys can do your own research if you want. But for toddlers, okay, kids beneath the age of reason.
You already, go ahead.
All right, so kids beneath the age of reason. And I think that the church has kids who are 7 or 8 receive their first confession and first communion that is such an appropriate time, because there are real psychological hurdles that are being overcome around. There are changes that happen at that age. And the church is an expert in humanity and recognizes that. And so that's when the church knows, you know what, these kids
are ready.
They know what they're doing. They are actually sinning now. Right. Now they need to go to confession.
They are culpable, and they can have knowledge and will.
So conversely, younger than that, they are so innocent. They really, really are. And there's so much they do not need to know. Okay, they cannot distinguish gray areas in their lives, in their little minds. For kindergartners, your preschoolers, there are good guys and there are bad guys.
Right, black
End
and
of story.
white. That's all they got. They got black and white. And I mean, there was that great book, although I don't know if I agree with everything in it, but The Landscape of Dragons. How,
yes.
Children's stories, for
Yep.
younger guys particularly, teens it's a whole different category, right? But for younger guys, creating myths or stories that had dragons as good or witches as good, there's problems.
Confusing.
It's confusing because they live in a black and white world.
Right.
Again, we're talking about under the age of reason. So it's like 7, 8 years old, 10, even up to maybe 10 years old. There's this substantial part where it is, you try to protect them, right? Is that what we're trying to say? We protect them from the grays of the world.
Well, it's two things. You're trying to protect them, but you're also trying to form them correctly.
Okay.
Because what they need to know at that point is that there is black and white.
Right.
That there is a structure. There are limits. They have to know that because within those limits, they're going to find security.
Yes.
Once they psychologically get those limits set in their mind, lying is wrong. You just tell them lying is wrong. It is always wrong, no matter what. Even though in your mind, there's actually exceptions to that, blah, blah, blah. They don't need to know that.
That's
they
right.
cannot
That's
understand
not helpful.
that. That is
Does
not
not
helpful.
compute.
It is not helpful. They just need to know this is wrong. That's
right.
the limit. Have that set in their mind. Disrespect to adults is wrong. It is always wrong, no matter what. And what you have to solidify that. And then
That's a foundation.
Exactly. It's a foundation. And then as they get older, then they will begin to be more capable. Older meaning, preteen, 11, 12, they will be able to comprehend more of the gray areas in abstract thought.
And the reality is that when you say abstract thoughts, it makes me think about principles. Kids at the early age, they know yes and no. They know true and false. And they don't understand. I mean, you talked about this as an educator, the algebra, that they teach algebra to kids at a later date because they can start beginning to comprehend the abstractness of it. Mm-hmm. But if we're at such a young age, the principles that, as a college student, understanding the principles of double effect, mm-hmm. how you can do something and there might be a unintended consequence of your actions that you are not necessarily culpable and morally bound to. It's like, they can't understand that. Are you kidding me? There are many adults who don't fully appreciate that.
And I think actually the math thing is a very, very good analogy because you really can't fully understand algebra unless you have the concept of what is 3.
Right.
What is 5? What is 10?
Right.
When you understand that, when you are a grade schooler,
right.
you get that really solid, and then you're going to be able to build on that.
That's right.
But if you don't have that solid, trying to teach a 5th grader algebra, they may be able to do it, or you think that they're not going to understand it, though.
That's
because
right.
they're not there yet. So don't try to do things so fast. Morally, let's build a firm foundation. Then build upon that.
That's why the crazy thing of our world wants to tear that apart because
mm-hmm.
they know if they get the young, they get them when they're young, they damage a lot because there is this huge. I mean, we've talked about education before, but this is a crucial age for their intellectual and moral and spiritual development when they're young. I mean, this is that golden time when if you're doing the right thing, when you're preparing them, you're setting their life up. I mean, because later on, they talk about the terrible twos and all these different things that go on. Yeah, there's some challenges with that, but you know what? This is when they need to know boundaries. This is when they need to understand right from wrong. Because if you don't have it right then,
exactly,
when they're teenagers, it's going to be a lot more difficult. Not that you can't do it. It's just going to be a lot more difficult. It's like, I think this is another analogy in some ways. It's like you teach your child how to, languages at that point, the way their brain processes, they just take it in. They're not thinking about the concepts that are behind it. They're just taking it in. When
intuitively,
intuitively,
mm-hmm.
yeah, they're just soaking it in. So they just soak in when they're younger. But when you're older, you have to learn it. It's harder. You can still do it, but boy,
it's a lot harder.
Yeah. Anyway, just realizing
but I mean,
you're learning at the language. The moral foundation
mm-hmm.
is truth and innocence.
Right.
And by founding your children on that, you're giving them a platform from which they can make even wise and prudent and mature decisions later in life.
Right. And if you don't do that, it's going to be more difficult for them to grasp those nuances later on. And I think that if you don't give them any kind of moral foundation or moral absolute limits, then it's just going to be more difficult for them to distinguish the gray areas later on. So they don't need to know exceptions to killing or robbery or lying or anything like that
Right.
when they're at that young age. So you have to be. So what does that mean? So it means that you need to be very careful on a practical level
Right.
of how you speak about people that you disagree with.
Yeah, this is a very, very big deal because we're going to have.
It
I
is.
mean, assuming people who listen to this are faithful Catholics, are sinners striving to be better, virtuous people. You're going to have a lot of people that you're in great contradiction with. You're going to be countercultural,
Right.
And
With friends, family family members.
coworkers.
Exactly. And for your children, they don't need to know.
Again, we're talking about the under the age of reason.
Right. We're still talking about little guys. They don't really need to know that, so-and-so believes that abortion is okay. They don't really need to know, oh, yeah, this person is gay.
Right.
They don't really need to know that at that
Right.
point in their life. What they do need to learn, one of the foundational things they need to learn is respect.
Right.
They need to learn respect for all people.
That's right.
They need to learn respect for authority. Because there may
Right.
be people like a teacher that this teacher doesn't share your values, but maybe you're in a situation where they have to be there. That child needs to learn respect for that teacher. End of story.
And although it's only doesn't apply just to education, but even if you disagree, you personally disagree with the teacher's decision. Let's say it's not moral. It's just how they grade, how they teach. You know what?
They put your child in the corner and he didn't deserve it. Whatever.
It's like, you know what? The far greater lesson is that for your child, that they need to learn respect, even in adverse situations, even in situations where it might not be just per se.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that there's obviously some prudential judgments where you might need to step in, but you do it. You don't have to drag your kid through that at that point in their life.
Right.
Right? I mean, would you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know that my parents, and when I was an adult, I found out that my parents actually went in and reamed out one of my high school teachers. And I never knew that,
Isn't that
literally
crazy?
until I was an adult, because my parents are not helicopter parents at all, but it was whatever. I don't even know what the situation was. But they told me later on that, oh yeah, we went in, we told him he was a horrible teacher.
But
and I was like, oh great, thanks a lot.
But for you, they said you got to listen to your teacher, what they said.
The only lesson that I got as a sophomore in high school was you do your best, you do your work. This teacher is to be respected. Like I said, I never even knew that they went in and spoke to him or that they had any disagreement at all. That's the way it should be. More important than anything else.
We're not going
kids
to mention
need to
that
learn.
teacher's name, though. That's
I
not
don't
gonna
remember
go.
his
We're
name.
not going to out him right now, whoever he is. God bless you.
But anyway, that they need to learn respect for.
And I think
whatever.
that it's important for not all, but a number of the people listening in are millennials, millennial parents, and it really is so easy for them to treat their kids like adults and to be those drone parents ready to swoop in and take over for their kids. And we need to say, step back. Wait a second. Is that very good for your child to be involved in all those different situations? Don't treat them like adults. Don't treat them like peers. You need to create a sense of protection for them and not drag them into those conversations.
Right. So, but then when you have kids who are, I mean, I know that there's that in-between age of like from the age of reason to like preteens, which I think that you can kind of start introducing slowly some of those nuances, but more quickly, I'm just going to jump ahead to your preteens and teens. Those are the kids that you really should begin sharing those nuances.
Right.
And, like when you have a teenager who comes to you who, whatever, has a disagreement with the teacher, or they find out that they had a conversation maybe with one of your relatives and they found out that they don't share your values on certain issues. Well, that's when you do need to teach your children, okay, well, we disagree with grandma's position on abortion, but we still love her and respect her, and we need to pray for her.
Right.
Yeah, and we're going to pray for her. That is something you share with your preteen. That is not something you share with your 6-year-old.
Well, let me just back up and say, like, just to give you an example, with a little kid, a 5-year-old, right? You teach them that smoking is wrong.
Right.
And I hope you do, because I do think smoking is wrong. But do I look at people who smoke and say they're immoral people? Of course not. And do I think I'd want to send my little kids out and to beat those people up, those adults who have made a what I would characterize as an imprudent decision? But it's a prudential judgment. They can make that decision. They're mature adults.
See, I would say even for a 5-year-old, I wouldn't even tell them smoking is wrong.
Right.
Why? Why? Am I afraid they're going to go smoke when they're 5? No.
Right.
It's not an option.
Right.
So why even discuss it?
Yeah. So, but the point being is that I have found, I mean, obviously neither Alicia or I smoke, but I've seen parents who were so ingrained it, or maybe the schools ingrained how evil smoking is, that they've gone up to people and were completely disrespectful to adults, demeaning them. Now, again, I might actually agree somewhat with the kid, but it was done in an inappropriate way. And
in an inappropriate way.
In an inappropriate way. In an inappropriate way. But, it's like, what are we teaching our kids?
Yeah.
I mean, is smoking a higher value than respect?
Right.
Meaning, or lack of smoking.
Right.
And it's like, wait a second. At this age in their life, they don't need to have, again, they see life as black and white. So you tell them this is wrong and evil, therefore they go out there. Likewise, they overhear everything you're saying. These little kids, when I remember watching TV thinking, oh, my daughter, she's a little kid. She's playing over in the corner. She's not hearing what's going on. Daddy, what is blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, oh, click TV off. Let's play that game over here, because they do pick up and pay attention to all those different things that are going on. And we really need to recognize that so that we don't drag them into those conversations, because, and then another parent talked about how our current president supports abortion. And then it became a little person, 6-year-old saying...
I think it was like an 8-year-old.
Okay, 6 or 7, 8-year-old saying the president kills babies. I was like, whoa. Now,
wait a second.
I completely disagree with his positions. I will fight. I will argue. I will, petition, pray, protest, whatever we need to do to protect unborn life, protect the babies. But I don't want to teach my 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old that someone's out there murdering little kids and that this is the person's name. And so but again, if the topic comes up, it's harder to hide them from that. If it's out there, you've got to deal with it.
I think so. Bottom line is, I shouldn't say the bottom line, but as far as like the kids under the age of reason, I really think that there's a lot that you just need to hide from them, to be honest with you, because it's not a moral issue for them. There's certain things that they don't understand and that they don't have to know about right then. Okay, so then when we're getting into second grade up, then there are issues that they should be aware of. But even then, like, for example, the fact that Obama supports abortion, well, they still need to know that we need to respect our president because he is the president. Right. We need to, like, again, what we're saying with the relative ideas, relatives or friends you disagree with. Yeah, this person spoke, but that's none of our business, honey.
No, well,
and we need to respect them.
Well, I don't know if I say it's none of our business. I think I would just simply say...
I would say it's absolutely none of our business.
That they support abortion?
No, I said if someone smokes.
Oh, well.
I said if someone smokes, it's none of your business. You don't go up and say to that person, you shouldn't be smoking. That's inappropriate.
Well,
What's
it's
more
disrespectful.
It's disrespectful and inappropriate. And so I think that's when, you have to draw the line. So I think that they are able to understand at that point that this thing is wrong. And so you can talk to them about the values and things that are wrong.
Right.
But they also have the ability to understand this is wrong, but it is also wrong to be disrespectful.
But I guess this is just a counterbalance or maybe a slightly nuanced comment there. Just because I don't want our kids to grow up thinking that we're somehow tolerating bad stuff. You know what I mean? Or that we're tolerating letting somebody sit there. So at a younger age, I'd agree with that. As they get a little older, I think they're, again, not that they bring it up, but that if it does come up, I don't know if I want them to run from it either. Do you know what I mean? Like,
what are you talking
meaning
about?
Meaning like using abortion as an example. Aunt Betty.
Okay, yeah, I think abortion and smoking are two very different things.
I agree.
One is a moral issue, one is not.
I agree. But I'm just saying that I think there are appropriate times for preteen, teens, where if appropriate, and it comes up, they don't seek it out, they make sure that they're always respectful.
Yeah.
But that out of the mouth of babes, we can have some really
Because
great
the reality is that if they speak,
of
if they are respectful, they're going to be more effective.
Correct. Truth and love, baby.
Exactly. And that's true no matter how old you are.
That's right.
And so I think that that's the harder thing to learn in some ways is to be respectful of other people and charity in all things.
But little kids can't get that yet. No. And so let's age appropriate, let's put them in that position where they have to.
All right, so I thought we could just talk about a couple specific issues that I think it's hard, issues that actually are going to come up.
Yeah, that's right. We talked about this. Yeah.
So of course there's the the question that every kid asks at some point, how are babies born? And
we don't believe in the stork first. Okay?
I do not tell my children that. No.
You're up to you if you're going there. Okay.
Okay. So So how do we answer that? And this is like, an older brother or sister. We're like your older brothers and sisters here talking.
You can disagree with this. That's okay.
Well, again, when they're really little, there's so much they don't understand. And when my little kids would ask me that, my preschoolers, I would just go, "It's a miracle," and they go, "Oh, wow. It's a miracle." Or I'd say, "It's from God. God just makes a miracle and the baby's born." And they're like, "Oh, okay, got it. That's good enough."
That's right. And I think that we as parents sometimes hear that question and
panic
and think through, "Oh my gosh, I've got to go through all the sperm, the egg. I got to go through this whole thing." I'm like, no. This isn't a biology lesson for a high school student,
right,
okay?
Right.
Back it up. Who's your kid? Who are you talking to? And also, you may think you know what they're actually asking, and it might not be what you think it is.
The general principle is start as broad as possible. Answer that question as broadly as possible. And then if they keep pressing it, then you kind of keep taking it in a click, So when I had a conversation, I remember with I don't even know how old they were, like 5 or 6 or something, 7. And I said the whole "it's a miracle" line, and they didn't buy it. They were like, no, but how is the baby born? Because they were smart enough, developmentally, they were smart enough to know there is a baby inside of you right now. And I've seen this happen where the baby comes out. How does that happen? And all I did was I just kind of made a motion with my hands, like between my legs and up. And I just said, "Just like this." And they went, "Oh." And that worked because
that was sufficient.
It was sufficient because it made sense to them.
Right.
And because they kind of know about what's down there, bathroom things and whatever, So they're like, "Okay, yeah, all right, got it," And
don't feel like you need to give a treatise. It was that answered it. The child was satisfied, and you moved on.
And of course, if you have a very precocious child, some children are very intelligent, feel free to get out like those cartoon pictures of, how the baby is inside the mom and, coming out. There's tons of stuff you get from your obstetrician. And I have taken those out for some of my kids as they have gotten older. When you go to the obstetrician and they give you, like pictures and things of like how the baby's born. Because a lot of women don't even, obviously women know how babies are born. But it's good, to just kind of know the biology of it. But again, very, very simply and beautifully and respectfully, showing that. It's not time to pull out the Bradley book and all like the naked pictures of women in labor. Like, don't do that.
Oh, Lord, have mercy.
You do not want to scar your child. Very simple cartoon pictures are
very appropriate.
Absolutely appropriate and fine.
For that older age. Meaning
if they keep asking the questions. Because again, you also need to kind of like that analogy that we've given before of like the leash. Not that we put our kids on leashes, but and when they're young, you hold them really close, but then you do have to let that out little by little. You do not want your 12-year-old or your 14-year-old still not knowing how babies are born, because that's a little ridiculous.
Well, no, because that would be negligence in your parenting.
Right.
Because what we're talking about, again,
then
is
that's naivete.
Under the age of reason. And
right.
why would say age of reason? They say 7 years old or so.
Well, but
and then you
kind of
slowly
keep
move
moving
it up. Right.
Moving it up.
Right.
And so, of course, about sex and all of that.
Well, and that'll come. That'll naturally come because in the beginning, it's where babies come from. It's not how the baby. Then they'll ask the question.
Well, especially if you're a mom who's pregnant a lot, like me.
How did the baby get in there? Then I know how it gets out. That will be.
I always use the
"It's
a miracle" line.
Yeah, that's great, and it works for a little while.
Or mommy and daddy loved each other so much that
God gave him a gift of
that God gave us a baby
because we had so much love, wanted to spread
right.
it.
And so it's not exactly like a fairy tale, because that is true. And again, it's that foundational aspect of what is the foundation of where that baby comes from? Love between mom and dad.
That's right.
And that is true. And then, you can move up from there. So you see how it's like a foundational thing that's not inconsequential, but it's very simple and broad.
And it's a building
starting
block.
there. And it's an appropriate building block. And then you kind of go up from there. Okay, so another issue that comes up is divorce. It's very sad. Maybe there's, listeners here who are divorced, who've already been through this with their children.
My parents are divorced,
People have grandparents, many grandparents
So when
are
our
divorced.
kids go over, they'll see mom and dad, my mom and dad.
Grandma Kathleen and Grandma Rosemary.
Right, and they're different locations. They'll figure it out. In the beginning, it may have been no big deal, and then it was
No, they didn't even ask.
No.
But then at some point, one of our kids was like,
wait a second.
How come mom's parents live together and dad's parents don't live together,
Right.
And you have to explain that. And it's not something that we sought after or is like, oh, hey kids, by the way, my 6-year-old child, this is what happened here. No. That's not possible, but not helpful. We had a situation with one of our sons over the summer. He was 9. He had a coach that he loved. It was so sad. A coach he loved that lived up the street from us, and he would go up and play with, the coach's had son, too, same age as Mike. And he was playing up there, and one day he came home, and he was really upset because his coach got divorced and moved away. And so his friend now, his dad, didn't live there anymore. And he was really upset. And like that night, he was crying and everything. And I know part of it was him missing the coach because we really liked the coach too. He was a really great man.
Yeah.
And who knows, obviously what their situation was. But when Mikey and I had that conversation, I knew that he would get over missing this coach who really liked. But I knew what is more important than that, the message I wanted to send to Mikey was that this will never happen to Dad and I.
That's right.
And that was the message that I drove home.
Yeah, I remember sitting down with him and him just crying to me.
Yeah.
And I was like, at first we were just thinking it was just the coach, but we realized very quickly it was like, this is much more than...
This is rocking his world.
Yeah, and why is it? And again, it didn't dawn on me immediately. Maybe it did for you, but it didn't dawn immediately. But then as soon as he started crying when I was talking to him, it was like, oh my gosh, it really did hit him where his world was feeling completely unsettled because, well, can this happen to me?
Did he verbalize that? Nope.
Did he say
he didn't even
know consciously, but there's no way. I mean, he's had other people in and out of his life where this is.
He's had other coaches,
right?
Whatever. But so I think that when divorce comes up, for your younger children, for the little guys, doesn't even need to be really talked about. Just, oh, yep, so-and-so doesn't live here anymore. Yeah, that's really sad.
Right.
We're moving on.
Right.
But then for the kids who are like Mikey's age, 8, 9, they're understanding where something happened here. I think the main message as parents we need to give them is this will not happen to Dad and I.
And you need to make that promise, and then you need to make sure you're doing everything in your power to live that promise to its fullest.
Yeah.
Because, obviously, that is what our kids need. Our kids need to know the stability of
security.
Our love. Because our love, our unity is what's going to save them from a crazy, chaotic world.
Right.
And also the reality that with any of these topics, it's like every child is different and every age is different. Just because your child experiences something at 7 doesn't mean another child, that might be not until they're 9 or 10. Who knows?
You as a parent
maturity.
have to make that call.
Yeah, so there's all these different things. It's a sliding scale of their maturity and their ability to understand. And also, too, we have kids who are more verbal and some who are less verbal,
right,
or not verbal at all. And it's like you've got to be much more engaged when things like this come up. You don't have to go there immediately, but you need to be sensitive. You need to be aware. You need to be thinking, okay, is there a deeper issue that's being unsettling also, our children, in this?
Yeah, and even if they're not thinking about will this happen to mom and dad, there is no harm in emphasizing that.
That's right.
There's no downside in saying to your child, just so you know, Dad and I, we're together for life.
That's right.
For life.
What's
we
the
will
negative
never
on
leave
that?
you. We will never leave you. We will never abandon you. We'll never leave each other. This is where we're at. And then, of course, keeping with the whole idea of preteens and teenagers talking about divorce, I think you really do need to go there and talk about more of the subtleties and the difficulties that it is to be marriage and that people have to work on it. That is appropriate because you are preparing them for adulthood. And they need to know that marriage is not just a walk in the park, that sometimes people have real issues like addictions and all of those things. And you need to make sure that you choose a good spouse, that you choose a good partner, and that when you do get married, that you work at it and that you work hard. That's not something you share with your 7, 8, 9-year-old. It is something you share with your 12-year-old maybe and up. And of course, that's,
And the best thing we can do,
no hard and fast
particularly
rule
for our
for
older
age,
kids, is both talking to them so they can intellectually understand it, but then just share with them. As you are being intentional in why things are important to you, why date nights are, all those different things. It's reassuring because, my parents got divorced when I was a teenager. And I had a lot of challenges going through that. But it wasn't until, through college and other times where those issues come out. And it's like, I missed some things. And your kids when they see that, it'll affect them, and they may not fully appreciate it right then. So do everything you can to make sure that the foundation is secure, that they know they are safe in your loving embrace.
And also, like, as far as the issue of annulments go, Mike's parents got an annulment. That's also something that when they're teenagers, they do need to understand that. Obviously, they're learning that if they're in Catholic school or whatever, catechesis. That's when, that whole, what is an annulment, that's very, very important for you to explain to your kids because it's confusing to adults. Many adults misunderstand annulments, but that's something, it's a good time for catechesis in that area. Okay, another issue. I was going to go to this one. Go
ahead. So just thinking of the evil that our world inflicts upon us is, sadly in our day and age is mass shootings.
This is something I know comes up with little kids in school, unfortunately.
It comes up in school, or they hear it on the news, or if you have older kids like we do, you're talking about it.
Yeah.
And then your little kids are hearing it. And it's like, you want to make sure you talk to your teenagers about it. But then what about these little guys who overhear that message?
So our advice, again, for those kids under the age of reason, the little kids, I would not discuss it at all. Like zero, nothing. There's nothing they can do about it. There's no way they can prepare for it. All that does is freak them out.
That's right.
And if I had a teacher, if they were in a school and they were doing drills or something to prepare for mass shootings, I would try to make it as clear as possible. Can we just make this really clear to the children? That we're doing this in case this is a drill. This is if an emergency happens.
Emergency.
You don't need to say to the kids you don't need to say it to first graders. If someone comes into school with a gun, this is what we're going to do. No, you just
they're going to be freaked out of going to school, period.
Yeah, you just say, this is an emergency drill. And if your school is not doing that, you as parents need to get in there and say something because it's just not appropriate.
That's right.
And so for you at home, don't talk about it. There's nothing to talk about here.
All that we need to do is make sure we as adults and the adults around them are ready to protect them from that, period.
So then obviously probably first graders, some second graders and up, those kids, they're going to be talking about stuff like this. They talk about it on the school ground. Kids know about that. And yes, again, it's similar to the divorce thing. What you need to tell to your children at that point is, yes, this may happen. Actually, yes, this may happen, but all you need to do, you just listen to everybody around you. And you...
Adults.
Right. You listen to the adults. Or you can say, hey, this is what we've done in our school. We've done this, this, and this, and you are going to be safe.
Right.
You're going to be safe. Even, again, in your mind, you don't know 100% they're going to be safe.
But they need that reassurance because, again, they can't do anything about it. And so when you have things that are way beyond your control, your little child does not need that stress in their lives.
Right.
And they see things still very much in a black and white, or they're just transitioning to understand abstract thought and theories of things. They treat them as if it's still in the black and white world when they're in that 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, because at that point they need the reassurance, again, like divorce, like all these other things. It's like they need to be reassured of that foundational principle, which is safety.
Right.
You can't exist without having a very substantial amount of safety. Nothing makes sense if you are not safe and don't feel safe.
And that's where I think the respect kind of comes back around. That's why respect is important, because you should say to them, your teacher, I trust your teacher. I trust your principal. Again, even if your mind, you don't 100%.
Because you need them to follow that teacher.
You need them to follow. If, God forbid, there is a problem, they need to absolutely, without question, immediately listen to the adults around them. And this is where our culture's lack of respect for adults is a real danger.
That's right. Because you need them to be respecting
you need them to
follow police's orders in an emergency. Right. Are you going to disrespect the police because that's what you've learned in your community or your parents or whatever?
Right.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
That's why we have adult supervision on any of these schools or law enforcement.
So those kids, the message really needs to be respect the adults. I trust them. They will take care of you. Yeah, teach them the St. Michael prayer too. Teach them this is the reality that God can protect you. St. Michael can protect you. Pray for that. But again, teenagers, it's that you're going to build all of that is still true. But I would speak to your teenager. We speak to our teenagers about being prepared.
And being smart and what that means.
Exactly. And being smart, being street smart, being aware, because you know what, they can handle it, and that's part of them becoming a mature adult.
Again, that's that you move from this sense of protecting innocence to building Christian maturity. And maturity is dealing with the putting our Christian life if you want to say conflict isn't the right word, engaging the culture, engaging the reality of the evils of this world, the injustices, the bad things that are going on. Mm-hmm. So that's what we need to do.
Yeah. So again, with teenagers, of course, you're never lying to them. You're never saying something that's not true. What you're doing is that you're just building upon what you tell them. Okay, just moving. I don't know why you're moving my papers around.
I don't know, because we already did this one.
Okay. So, all right. So another really difficult thing to talk to kids about is abortion.
Okay, yeah, we missed that.
Because, and that again is something, especially in Catholic schools,
it's gonna,
in Catholic schools, it's going to come up kind of in a good way.
That's right.
You know, because they pray at Mass and things like that against the evils of abortion.
I remember when we had, I don't remember who it was, Katie, or a couple of our first kids, when it was a homily. And
yeah, it was,
thank God, actually, it was a good homily on the support for life. But our kids were young, and they didn't know what abortion was. And they asked in the parking lot in the church as we're going home, Daddy, what's abortion?
And unfortunately for good Catholics, you know, you have places where you want your priest to be talking about abortion and praying for the end of abortion, but it brings it up a little early. And again, you know, my 5-year-old
depending on your family, obviously.
Exactly. My 5-year-old is not asking me what abortion is. And it's, again, it's something I absolutely would hold off as long as possible. I would not talk about it. Do not deal with it. They cannot deal with it. Remember the whole black and white thing, because certain things you need to have remained hidden. There's something in the dark that we don't want to speak about, the things in the dark, but we want to protect the innocent. And when you have kids that do start asking those questions, Mom, what's abortion? We just say it as simply and as broadly as possible.
Right.
When a woman decides to kill a baby.
Right.
Don't even say a mother. Because even saying a mother, I feel like it's too...
Yeah, it translates too much to relationships and their world.
Yeah.
In their world. It's like, okay, you're my mother.
Yeah, exactly.
You could have done this to me?
Yeah. And like maybe a 10-year-old would ask that, and then you can have that conversation. But the first initial conversation just needs to be as broad as possible. And you know, and with great sorrow. And of course saying, and we need to pray, you know, for those women who decide to kill a baby, and then just leave it at that.
But, you know, and again, this is just a little bit of a side note, but think about the kids. Now, again, I'm making an assumption here that people listening to this podcast, maybe in their past, some of them have had an abortion, and there's healing, and there's hope, and there's a restoring for the future. But thinking about our culture, the children that are raised in this culture who get that abortion happens, and they realize, oh, my mom could have aborted me, and that they did abort my brothers or sisters, or, you know, whatever that might mean. Like, how unsettling that is for a child, knowing just from a psychological level, safety is so crucial. If you don't have safety, you've got nothing. And if you think an innocent little child could be, I mean, that's really
that's pretty
deeply
heavy.
Damaging and also debilitating. But anyway, sorry, little.
So you just bring it as simply as possible, and then, you know, as they get older, they will take it in, you know, and you just see it. It's little by little. That's one of the reasons I really feel like the abortion protesters who show gruesome pictures, it's just not appropriate. It's just not appropriate, because you have little kids who are going to see that and really be damaged by that. And now, of course, when you get to, again, preteens, teenagers, you can go there. Yes, you can get into that a little bit more, because they need to understand you're preparing them for adulthood in the context of your family, and this is the reality of our world, unfortunately. And they already know that there's evil. You know, I doubt that there's any teenager there that doesn't know what abortion is. Well, but you can talk about that at that point, but not when they're younger. You just have to take it as broadly as possible.
I know it's because of the Supreme Court decision. A while back had the March for Life. We also had the Martin Luther King holiday and celebration. And so it's like, you know, there are evils in our world. Abortion. You look at slavery and the civil rights.
Slavery. I mean, when you study, we homeschool our little kids, and you know, we have one of our closest friends is a Black family, and you know, it was really awkward to explain slavery and to explain the civil rights movement. But again, I had to do it. I mean, we were in 2nd and 3rd, 4th grade at that point, but. You know what? We got to go there. We got to say
our world is broken.
Yeah,
you know, and the fact that it wasn't. I mean, it's not ancient history that we had civil rights issues in this country. You know,
right?
And obviously, slavery still exists in the world today.
Yeah.
And
But
so,
again, that's not something I explained to my third grader.
Right, right.
And I did not explain how horrible slavery was. Just said it as simply as possible. You can see the pictures. People believed that they could own someone else.
Right.
And that was wrong. Just like the Israelites in Egypt.
Yeah.
Yes, isn't that crazy?
Right.
That, and you just kind of, but we've moved on from that. Praise God. But then as they get older, yeah, slavery does exist today. Yeah, they can watch, some of the horrible movies like Amistad is a great movie to watch.
I love that.
12 Years a Slave, no, not so much. That was really disturbing.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I mean,
those are things that way when they're much older and can understand that, take it in.
Right. Any other final points before we go to
Well, there's the gay marriage issue, because homosexuality, again,
Well, I just think it's a very similar topic as the other one, in the sense that it's just like, this is the world is encroaching on our lives. You may have a family member. You may have friends, coworkers, people that you visit that
certain things just need to remain hidden. And honestly,
are attracted to members of the same sex.
With homosexuality, I would keep that hidden until they're like
until
really
they can
as
deal
long
with
as
it.
possible, until they're like a teenager, honestly.
Yeah. Well, but again, your situation may require you to deal with it in some ways. And again, we've had couples asking about, well, how do you keep that? Like, if you have a member of your family, you want to visit them.
This is their good friend.
Right.
This is their good friend. This is their best friend.
Right.
The
chances are your kids, if you don't already have them, your kids will. If you don't already have them, your kids will have friends who are attracted to members of the same sex, and so
or living with members.
And
of the same sex.
we cannot, as Catholic parents, put our heads in the sand. We are talking about. I mean, as Alicia said, we're trying to protect their innocence and try to keep those subjects away from them, and so that they can process them, so they can deal with them. But the reality is our world is encroaching closer and closer to their innocence, and we've got to protect as much as we can. But when we know it's right, because my brother had little 8-year-old, 10-year-old in school. They had a coming out day at the school, and it's like you've got to look at what's going on in your child's world, and we can't put a cocoon around them until they're 22 years of age. But it's this whole idea of holding back as long as you can on some of these very not controversial, these very inappropriate and age appropriate is the key in this, and realizing how much can they understand so they can apply it. Because if it's not going to affect their world, keep it as far away as you can, until they're of teen years. But
if it does affect their world, you just try to say it as simply as possible.
Right.
Leonard Sachs just came out. He's an author and
we love
psychologist.
Him.
He
Boys
wrote
Adrift,
Why Gender Matters.
Why Gender Matters.
And then Girls on the Edge. He just came out with a new book that we're actually going to listen to, which is called The Collapse of Parenting. And in this, he actually talks about some of these issues about age appropriateness and how parents are really treating their children more like that they're peers or friends. But the three things that he says is that our three obligations as parents, our jobs, are first of all to teach right from wrong, then teach the meaning of life, and keep our children safe.
Right.
And I absolutely would agree with that. So as we're closing up today, I want to give you some three discussion questions that we'd like you to talk about with your spouse.
Because just as a podcast, just a reminder, our hope isn't that you agree with us all the time, but that it starts a conversation for you and your spouse so that you can go deeper and be more intentional parents. So so these questions, hopefully, you can think about if the topic itself didn't already give you enough to talk about.
And we'll put this on the website.
On the show notes, on messyparenting.org.
Yeah, well, always from now on, we're going to try to put these questions like this in our show notes on there. So first of all, how will we protect our children's innocence?
Right.
Second, what issues are on the horizon?
Because look at your situation. Plan
your
it out.
Family, your school,
don't
whatever.
Be stupid. Oh my gosh, we're going to be with the relatives, and guess what? They're not with us on these values or whatever.
Right. Start talking about that ahead of time, and which goes to the third one. What's going to be our response to our children?
That's right.
Because you as parents, it's going to be most effective if you're united front and you're not blindsided by these things. So don't be stupid and think about these things ahead of time and have those conversations with each other. So you're ready to have those conversations with your children.
So I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you like it, share it on Facebook or rate it on iTunes. If you got questions, comments, send it in to messyparenting.org. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, let this be a conversation topic that you and your spouse have so you can be more intentional and more effective parents. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.